Sunday School Leader. Hey, we are starting a brand new month, a brand new book, a brand new unit. So let's see what we've got coming up. So our new unit is entitled, Why Are We Here? And this is the first week, and it's entitled, Why Are We Even Here? It's out of Genesis chapter 1, the first 5 verses, and verses 26 through 31. And the point of the lesson is that God created us to live in fellowship with Him. So why are we here? I know this question has been asked for centuries, of course. And if you look at a totally secular philosophy, you may hear something like, well, it's all by chance, and he who dies with the most toys wins. Now, if you grew up in more of a liturgical atmosphere, some of our other denominations go through a catechism. Now, the Westminster Catechism, one of the questions asked is, what is the chief end of man? And the proper response to that is, man's chief end is to glorify God and to enjoy Him forever. Well, when we want to discover, let's say, the meaning of art, whether that's a song lyrics, what's the meaning behind the song lyrics, or what's the meaning of a poem, or what did the author have in mind when he wrote this book, or he painted this work of art, the easiest way to do that is to ask the author. We can guess and suppose and all that, but when we ask the author, we're going to get the direct answer to that. So let's see what our author, our creator, has to say. That, of course, is God, as we look in the first part of Genesis. And that's, of course, the best place to start is at the beginning. We are all familiar with that first verse in the Bible, Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God. It's important to note that God was already there, always has been, always will be. That's the meaning behind eternal, isn't it? So at the beginning of our reference of time, when God started creation, He was already there. He's the author, He's the creator of all of this stuff. He says He created the heavens and the earth. The earth, of course, is the earth. We know that. The heavens is everything else. Everything that's not earth, all the stars, the moon, the sky, not God's residence. Okay, we think of heaven, God's residence, but here we're talking about the heavens and the earth. Kind of like you talk about the Jews and the Gentiles. The Jews are a specific set of people. The Gentiles is everybody else. Kind of like that. You got the earth and everything else. Okay, so God created all things. That's important to note. God created all things, both the seen and the unseen, the things we can see and things we can't see. Now, you may or may not want to read the entire creation story out of Genesis 1, verses 6 through 25, the rest of that story. You could briefly refer to this table about creation. I want you to note that the items of creation in days 4, 5, and 6 filled the creation that was created, of course, in days 1, 2, and 3. Just kind of an interesting little parallel there that you might want to share with your class. So in your class, you're probably going to have people on both sides of this issue that I'm going to speak about probably pretty strongly. And it really doesn't matter to the conversation, to the lesson today. And that issue is, did God create the earth and everything else in 6, what we call 24-hour days, or was this 6 eons of time? It doesn't matter. I lean toward these 6 24-hour days. So God spoke creation into existence out of nothing. He didn't have pre-existing materials. The Latin theological term for this is ex nihilo, which means out of nothing. When we create something, we take pre-existing materials. We'll take wood and paint and all this, and we'll make something. God had nothing and made everything. So He spoke it into existence. He didn't toil, He didn't sweat, He didn't wring His hands and worry over it. He just spoke it, and it was. So we get down to verses 26 and 27, and in the creation story, God said, let us create man in our own image. A couple of thoughts there. Some folks think this is the plural of majesty, or the royal we. It's something that a king would say to show that he is above other people by saying, we do this. I think it's more likely to be a veiled reference to the Trinity. Here in Genesis 1, we see God, we see the Spirit hovering over the waters. It's not until we get over to John chapter 1 that we see that Jesus Himself was the agent of creation. So in the creation of human beings, both male and female, we see that they were created in the image and likeness of God. There again, if you want to use a little Latin, and there again, it depends on your class. You know, some people get into this kind of thing and some people don't. That's why I like to mention a bunch of different things that you may want to use or not use. That Latin, of course, is Imago Dei. You may have heard of that. I think there's an album by that title that came out several years ago. Anyway, there's a whole chapter in my systematic theology book from seminary that's devoted to the image of God and what does that mean? What do different Christian thinkers suppose that meant over the centuries? Well, there's a lot of thoughts there, of course. It could pertain to he created us to be in relationship with each other, just as the Godhead is in a relationship. It could be that he created us to be in dominion over all other creation, just like he himself is over dominion or in dominion over us. It could be that we have a spirit, whereas all other creation, all other life forms on earth do not have that spirit. I kind of propose that it's all of these. It's a mixture of all these things that are kind of godlike, we possess as well. Hear me out. I'm not saying that we are gods. I'm not saying that, but there's some image, there's some likeness there that we are similar to God in that. So we can ask the question, did the image of God, was that just on Adam and Eve, or does that apply to all humans? And I would say that it applies to all humans, because we can look in Genesis chapter 9, verse 6, and it says, "For whoever sheds the blood of man, by man his blood shall be shed. For God made man in his image." And this is a long time after creation, so several generations into the history of the world that this was said. So I would say that yes, it applies to all human beings. Get down to verse 31, and God said, he looked at when he made male and female, he made humankind, and he said this was very good. This is the only time that he said very good. The other 5 times when he created all these things, he said, and he looked and he said it was good. But here, it was very good. Josh Hunt is one of my favorite Bible teaching kind of people. In fact, I've had him at all 3 churches that I have ministered at. I've had him come to speak at least once in my tenures there. He produces a video each week for Sunday School University, which you may want to look into. It's a subscription service. But this week he has his video for this week is free. And so I have a link to that, which is probably underneath me here. But you may want to check that out. And in fact, it's tinyurl.com/PrepTalk001. I made that a little easier so you wouldn't have all the YouTube upper lowercase characters to type and all that. So that'll get you to that video. It's about 17 minutes. And in that video, he shows about a 3-minute clip of a video from Dr. Bill Toller. In fact, he was my professor. Dr. Bill Toller was. He was my Old Testament professor in seminary. And he goes into creation. He talks about creation as a chance or as a choice. And so I've got a link to that entire 30-minute presentation that Dr. Toller did. Very intriguing. And so you might want to watch that. In fact, I've got that link here too. It's tinyurl.com/PrepTalk002. All right, so the universe, Earth, humans, not a product of chance. If you do believe that, if you believe it's all just a matter of chance, then there's really no purpose to life. It's all just a crapshoot. But it was all designed and created. Human beings being that apex of creation. Everything was created with purpose and intention. Now, I've got to admit, and I'm really honest when it comes to this kind of thing. I have a problem with this lesson, and not necessarily the lesson, but the point of the lesson, which is God created us to live in fellowship with Him. Actually, that's a true statement. I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem with was putting that point of the lesson with the scripture text. Nowhere in the scripture text does it mention that we were created to live in fellowship with Him, and I don't get where the arc is to make that jump. Could be I'm not as smart as the average bear. I don't know. What I read in this text is that we are all made in God's image, that we have dominion and are to rule over all the animals and over all the earth. And because of this, we can conclude that we are more than just another mammal in the animal kingdom. All humans are valuable, and also that all humans are valuable, and that the biblical view of creation, of human creation, should affect our worldview, which actually ties back to our previous unit on standing up against injustices to people. We should, if we see the value in all human beings, we should stand up against human trafficking, pornography, abortion, racism, all these things that devalue human life. So, starting off this new unit, next week we're still in Genesis, but we're looking at why are we in this mess, okay? We're going to look at how sin marred our image. We're created in the image of God, that sin marred that image, but it didn't erase it. All right, like I say every week, don't forget to pray for your class, and thank you for watching.